In today's video, we'll be working with this box on the right here. So we'll be discussing the CSS Box Shadow Property, which allows you to have a shadow behind an element. It is pretty simple to understand, but it has a few values to it that would be nice to know and understand so you can create some interesting designs. So to start off with getting a shadow behind our box over here, we have to use the property that is known as Box Shadow, with the hyphen for separating the two words over here. Then in here, in order to get any type of shadow over here, we just need to define two values. So I will go with 30px for the first value and 30 pixels for the second value as well. And if I save that, you should see a pretty nice shadow over here. It's looking nice already. From this alone, you can tell that we have a shadow on the right of the box over here, and we have a shadow at the bottom. So the first value over here works along the horizontal axis to move from left and right, and then the bottom one works in the vertical axis, which is up and down. The best way to see this is to exaggerate some values over here. So for the first value, I'll just put 70 pixels, and if I save that, you can tell that it moves on to the right. And we can just use negative values, and if I say negative 70 and we save that, you can tell that it moves on to the left over here. This works for the second value as well, where the negative one will go up top and the positive will go down. These two values over here are really the only values that you need to see some visual results over here. There are more values though that can change the shadow quite a bit. So the third value is known as the blur radius, and the higher the value, the more blurred or softer the shadow will be. So we will just make some space over here and use the same value of 30 pixels. And now if I save that, you can tell that the shadows are much more softer. This now looks more like a shadow. And of course, if we increase this value a bit more, it will look a lot softer and will start just to fade out like that. So now the fourth value that we'll be looking at is known as the spread, okay? So what the spread does is that it adds or spreads the amounts you put over here, and then it adds the blur after that. So what I mean by this is, as you can see over here, we got a blur around over here, okay? So first, actually, let me just take that to 0 pixels and leave that at 30 pixels over here. Or 10, okay. So now we got like the subtle shadow over here around, so it's like the blur. So now if I go in here and then I say 30 pixels, you can tell that it spreads out first, and then on the edges, you can see the blur starts to take effect. So it doesn't take effect immediately. So I can exaggerate this to 100 pixels as well. And then you can tell that the spread goes all the way there and the blurs around that spread. You can also use negative values over here as well. So I'll just return this to 30, and then maybe here we'll say negative 10. And then we have this nice little effect where it's going inside instead of the outside. So the spread is pulling it in since it's negative, and when it's positive, it's pushing it out. Now for the last value over here, just after the spread, this is just the color you would like your shadow to be over here. First thing I would like to point out before I add any color is that we did not specify any color over here, and it took the default color of black. This is not actually the case. What happens is the box shadow over here takes the color of the text that we have over here. So since this is black, this will also be black over here. Now in order for me to show you what I mean, I'll just remove the spread over here quickly, and I'll return everything to 30 pixels again. And then if I save that, you can tell that we have the shadow again. And then over here, we will specify a color of green. And if I save that, you'll notice how the text green over here matches the box shadow green over there. Now while this is great in most circumstances, in some browsers you could have issues where the default value of the box shadow over here does not match the one in your text over here. This is an issue with how different browsers all have different default values for other properties. So we can solve this by explicitly stating another color over here of green, or we can use the current color keyword over here. And this achieves the same result, but makes sure that it's going to use the current color that you have over here, instead of relying on the browser that the person is using. Alright, so right now I'll just remove this current color, and then I'll remove this green as well over here. So I'm just going to comment it out. If I save that, we should return to a default shadow. Now what our last value does is just that it takes the box shadow from the outside and puts it on the inside over here. So I'll go to the beginning of our box shadow and just type inset. Now if I save that, you can tell that our box shadow has gone from the outside to the inside. And this does not look the prettiest. So we can just adjust a few values over here by making the first two 0 pixels and leaving the blur at 30. Now if we save that, we have this nice little effect over here going on. Lastly, for our box shadow property over here, you can stack I think as many box shadows as you'd like on top of each other. You can achieve this by just separating the initial box shadow with the comma right over here. So I'll just remove the inset over here, and then bring back 30 pixels for these two values over here, and then I give it a color of red, and I'll save that, and you should see the result of red over here. Now what I'll do is I'll separate it with the comma, and then we'll just do the opposing value. So negative 30, negative 30. Sorry about that, 30 pixels. And the box shadow can't be negative, so it still has to be 30 pixels. And then I'll just put on green over here. Now if I save that, you can tell that there's another box shadow over there. Now I'll add a third one over here, with the first one being 100 pixels and the second being minus 60 pixels, and then the same blur, and then I think I'll add it as yellow. And if I save that, you can tell there's a third box shadow over there. So now what I want you to notice is that the first one is red, so that's going to be on the first one over here in front of everything, and the second one, which is the green, and then the last one, which is the yellow, behind everything else. Now if you don't want a long list of code over here, sorry about that, you can just separate it by just doing this and putting it right under each other over here, separating by the comma. This just gives you more readable and cleaner code. I think that's about it when it comes to understanding how the box shadow property works. Hope you guys found this video helpful in any way. With that, I'll see you guys in the next one.